Hello everyone. Today's case revolves around an innocent young man who was murdered in a park not far from his home. It's been decades, and still his family has no answers and there's no justice for this young man. But hopefully today, spreading the word on his case may lead to some. Jason MacCullough was born on July 9th of 1980 to parents Alan and Carolyn, later getting a little brother named Scott. Alan was said to be a land surveyor and his wife Carolyn an accountant. Jason grew up in Dartmouth, Nova Scotia, a community in the Halifax Regional Municipality located on the eastern shore of Halifax Harbour. The MacCulloughs lived in a duplex on Russell Street, where his family lived on the bottom floor and his cousin Vanessa Clark and her family lived on the top. So Jason and his brother Scott were often outside playing with their cousin Vanessa. They were very close with her, even teaching her how to play basketball. Even though Scott was younger, him and Jason shared a lot of the same friends. Those friends later saying, and I quote, "Jason was the sweetest guy you could have met. We give you the shirt off his back, and I know he did that in one case. Like, that's the kind of guy he was." End quote. What I learned while researching this case is that the way that people speak about Jason is how anyone would want to be remembered. And it's honestly beautiful. Jason, who was also nicknamed Jace or Piglet, was said to be extremely kind and would often be found helping his elderly neighbors with groceries, mowing their lawns in the summers, and shoveling their driveways in the winters. Growing up, he was a chief scout for the Scouts of Canada and volunteered for the Boys and Girls Club at Dartmouth's North Site location. He loved R&B music, worked the night shift at a local gas station, and was known for his outstanding customer service there. Because as I said, he was described overall as just an amazingly friendly person. He was also said to be very considerate and giving. So there were stories that he would bring his coworkers breakfast when they would switch off from their shifts. In the late 90s, Jason graduated from Dartmouth High School and was accepted to St. Mary's and Dalhousie University, and even considered going to the Navy to pay for his schooling. His parents saying, and I quote, "He didn't want to take our money. He wanted to pay his own way." End quote. But the lives of the MacCullough family and the community as a whole would change in the early hours of Saturday, August 28th of 1999. Earlier that evening on the Friday night, Jason had attended a party at a friend's house located on Joseph Young Street. Around 1:30 a.m., he decided he was going to start walking home, and he decided to take a shortcut along a paved path between 100 and 104th Pinecrest Drive. This path, as you can see here, was surrounded by townhouses, a playground, basketball court, and apartments. And this was a path that Jason frequently used to take as a shortcut back to his home. Because as you can see on the map here, if you cut through here, it would be a quicker route. At approximately 1:37 a.m., a shot would ring out in the neighborhood. Neighbors would end up calling the police due to the gunfire and would later report hearing footsteps running away from the scene. It wouldn't be until around 2:30 a.m. when police would arrive and find a body laying on the paved pathway through the park. The body would quickly be identified as 19-year-old Jason, who had been shot in the back of the head as he passed the playground at a very close range. He'd been killed just 6 blocks away from his home at the very beginning of his walk back. And his death really got me thinking about things, thinking about how just moments before he was having fun at this party with his friends and he just decided he wanted to go back home. So he started his walk, a walk he'd done many times before, a walk that wasn't unfamiliar to him. And then out of nowhere, he's shot in the back of the head. And it is scary to think about how quickly life can just be over with. It's scary and it's sad. To think this young man that had so much potential, again, was just walking home. And his life was just taken from him like that, in the blink of an eye. So if anything, we can hope that he did not suffer. And that he didn't even realize what had happened. Because if it truly was from behind him, he may never have seen it coming. Later that day, Jason's cousin Vanessa would return home and be told that she needed to go complete her paper route and that when she got back, they needed to speak to her. Upon arriving back home, Vanessa would be informed by her parents that Jason had been shot while walking home and that he did not survive. And what I found very profound that Vanessa had to say was that the next morning while she was delivering the papers, she was delivering the news of her own cousin's death. There was an image of her aunt on the front cover that she had to take to each home. Keep in mind, Vanessa was only around 12 years old at this time. The news of Jason's death truly rocked his family and the community. Jason was the last person that anyone thought would be murdered due to gun violence. He had never been involved in any criminal activity. He was a great student. He had a job. He was trying to pay to go to college. He had a good social standing with everyone in the community. As I said, he even helped his elderly neighbors. He was the image of what everyone could hope that a perfect son could be. And as police began to investigate Jason's murder, they quickly began to realize that there truly was no motive for it. There was no financial, no sexual, and no personal reason for anyone to have killed Jason. They realized he also hadn't been shot in the commission of a robbery because he still had his wallet on him that had cash in it. He had a watch on him as well as a valuable ring still that no one took. If any murder didn't make sense, it was this one. Why would someone just shoot an innocent teenager in the middle of the night? And once police determined that Jason hadn't been involved in any criminal activity, they basically said that his murder was completely random. It was a completely random act. The authorities themselves were so dismayed over Jason's murder that the police chief himself came out and said that they were handling his case with a blank check, which is extremely rare for that to happen. Like, the authorities are always trying to be so tight with their budget. They don't want to spend money to send out search dogs, to do this, to do that. But in Jason's case, they were handling it with a blank check, meaning they were going to spend as much money as they needed to solve this. At Jason's funeral, police attended, keeping check on who showed up, and filmed the people coming and going from the church and funeral home. Those close to the family said Jason's parents were holding up, but his little brother Scott was having a very tough time. A sketch would eventually be created and put out in newspapers showing a lineup of suspects related to Jason's murder, and showed 5 different men, all with different ethnicities. One, described as a white male in his late teens to early 20s, standing 5'9" and around 170 pounds. A black male with dark complexion in his mid-20s, standing 5'9" and around 210 pounds. One black male with a medium complexion in his mid-20s, standing 5'8" tall and around 180 pounds. A white male in his late teens to early 20s, standing 5'8" tall and around 160 pounds. And lastly, a black male with a light complexion in his late teens to early 20s, standing 5'8" tall and around 150 pounds. Police would also come out to say that they believed at least 2 of Jason's murderers fled in a maroon-colored station wagon. This vehicle was reported to have been seen cruising in the area that night between 10 p.m. to 4 a.m. During a probe, it was said that police did end up finding this vehicle, however, it had been borrowed, so it didn't seem like they could tie it to whoever they found it with in the end. Police saying, and I quote, "We're not calling those people suspects. What I can say is that the men in the car are among the group of 4 believed to have been directly involved in the murder." End quote. It would eventually come out that police seemed to know exactly who these 5 individuals were that they were putting out in the media these sketches for. However, because of their lack of evidence, they couldn't directly say these suspects' names. They basically released these sketches in hopes that someone would come forward and say, yeah, I recognize this person and I've seen them at the scene of the crime. And it actually ended up working because once these sketches were put out in the media, 60 calls would come in with tips identifying the men. It was reported that just hours before Jason's murder, 3 of these men actually ended up being involved in a separate crime. 3 of these men had allegedly broken into an acquaintance's home on Pinecrest Drive, located not far from the path that Jason would later take. During the robbery, it was said that one of these men ended up pointing a gun at the victim, demanding money, and he would end up robbing this man of hundreds of dollars. These 3 men would later be arrested, and they would plead guilty to various charges. It would turn out that these men also lived in the same area. These 3 men would later be identified in March of 2000 in the Daily News newspaper as Tyrone Downey, Christian Marsman, and Stephen Meekins. The other 2 men from the previous sketches have never been identified as far as I've seen. However, all 5 of these men have never been tied to Jason's murder. Now, as theories go at Jason's murder, I think one of the biggest theories is that he was mistaken for someone else, and that is why he was murdered. Possibly these men that were involved thought he was someone else, maybe they had beef with or other gang activity with, and so that is why they walked up behind him and shot him in the head. There has been theories as well that he was just in the wrong place, wrong time, and a stray bullet may have hit him. However, police have specifically said he was shot at a very close range, as if the gun was almost to the back of his head. And that's so unfortunate that this young man may have been mistaken for someone else. And the biggest issue with Jason's case is if the people involved with it that have killed him are criminals, it is very, very unlikely that someone is going to talk. This isn't one of these cases where, someone killed a friend over something, or they killed a spouse or a child, someone they knew, and maybe they mentioned something to a loved one that's going to speak up. The people involved in this are most likely all criminals, and everyone surrounding them are also criminals, and no one's going to want to snitch on each other. So even if someone did say something, which I'm sure someone out there has said something, this isn't most likely a secret. I'm sure there are tons of people that know who did this, just police can't get that information to link these individuals to the actual murder, which is what they need. They need some kind of evidence to link these people, or else they have no case. And that's the sad part. It's been over 20 years, and Jason's case has still never been officially solved. Jason still has no justice when his life was brutally taken from him like this. Jason's father, Alan, also agreed to all of this when he said in 1999, and I quote, "I don't think there was a reason, but some scumbag knows, and there's other people out there who know about the scumbag." End quote. And that sentiment is even furthered because there are stories about specific residents trying to call in tips to Crime Stoppers and then the aftermath getting threatened by people. Dwayne Smith, who is actually a chairman of the Criminal Justice Department at the University of North Carolina at Charlotte, would say to the press, and I quote, "I wish the police the best of luck in this because they're going to need it. The majority of homicides involve a specific outburst of anger, but we do see a more generalized kind of anger in which, unfortunately, the victim have the incredible misfortune of being in the wrong place at the wrong time." End quote. Basically, he was saying, like, the police are going to have a really hard time solving this case because this doesn't meet the specific, normalcies of a murder. There's usually some motive. And the issue was here, there was no motive. Whoever killed Jason, he didn't know them. They didn't have a reason to. And if anything, it may have been because they mistaken him for someone else. Or maybe he ended up witnessing something in that park that he shouldn't have witnessed, and then he was murdered because of that. Again, the sentiment of the wrong place, wrong time. On August 29th of 1999, Carolyn and Alan would make a very emotional plea during a press conference for answers. Alan being quoted in the Edmonton Journal saying, and I quote, "We may have overprotected him a little, but we never thought something like this would happen in North End, Dartmouth. We had 19 good years with this kid. I only wish we could have had more." End quote. Police would speak just days later in the newspaper explaining how the community was feeling as a whole. Police spokesperson Judy Powell saying, and I quote, "We cannot remember the last time an innocent was involved in a homicide. There's usually some relation to drugs or prostitution or outlaw motorcycle gangs, but this is just a random act of violence against a man who had everything going for him. We hope that if someone has heard something, they perhaps will be encouraged to come forward. We don't have the leads we would normally have." End quote. In April in 2005, new information would surface where police believed that a woman had been in that park that Jason was walking through the night of his murder. And police wanted this woman identified so she could be questioned if she had any information. However, I've never seen anywhere online where it said if police ended up finding this woman and if she gave them any information. In the aftermath of Jason's death, the Boys and Girls Club that Jason frequented, that was part of Dartmouth, began organizing an annual walk in honor of Jason and the other victims of violence. Investigator Tom Martin saying, and I quote, "One of the things about Jason's case that sticks out to me is that he was roughly my son's age when it happened. Here's a kid walking through a park. It could have been any one of our kids." End quote. Now, the name of the park that Jason was killed at would eventually be changed to honor his memory, and it now stands, as you can see here, with a sign that says the Jason MacCullough Memorial Park. Jason's case is also part of a province-wide reward for the Major Unsolved Crimes Program, which offers up to $150,000 for information that leads to an arrest and conviction of certain cases. And we've actually talked about quite a few cases that are part of this program on my channel before, Devin Marsman being one of them that comes to the top of my head right now. But unfortunately, this is all the information that is in Jason's case. Police seemingly have nothing, or at least they haven't told the public if they do have something. All we have are these 5 sketches of these 5 men, some of them with names, who police believe were involved in Jason's murder. However, they've never been tied to it. I want to guess that all that was left behind at the scene of the crime was probably just the bullet that killed Jason. But you'd think that police might have been able to trace it to a gun. However, as criminals often do, they dispose of these guns, and this gun was most likely illegally obtained because, unlike in the US, we can't just be walking around Canada with handguns, or whatever type of gun was used. I want to assume it was most likely some kind of handgun. But if you have any information on who killed Jason and the situation surrounding it, please say something. Please contact the authorities. I'll have all the information of who to contact down below, but this is just one of those cases. This is a young man that had so much going for him, and it was all taken away in the blink of an eye. And Jason deserves more than that. Jason deserves justice. He deserves answers. And the individuals who killed him could still be walking out there right now free. If they so quickly and violently could do something like this to Jason, who's to say they couldn't do it to someone else, someone you love? My heart goes out to Jason's family. I truly hope you will eventually get answers and that Jason could get justice. But I hope you all stay safe out there, lock your windows and doors, and I hope to see you in the next video.